A thought-provoking piece. We challenge the artist to take us outside of our comfort zone by imagining a human-machine interaction in the expressive art of dance, and they fully delivered. Thank you to our partners, Arrogant Film, and the artists who created this and set the stage for our immersion into a virtual experience that is human-centered and technology-enabled. And with that being said, let's now begin the idea sharing by tackling the first topic on the discussion, impact of automation and AI on the global economy. For this topic, we have invited two special guests. My colleague, Beatriz Sanz, will conduct an interesting interview with Mary Hallward-Driemeier from World Bank. Beatriz is the global leader for data and analytics in EY. She held several technology-related leadership roles in EY and leading financial services organizations. She has extensive experience in strategy and deep knowledge of artificial intelligence and analytics. Mary is a senior economic advisor in finance, competitiveness, and innovation, global practice, World Bank Group, overseeing the analytical agenda on issues of private sector development, technology, and productivity. During her 25 years long career with World Bank, she published widely on entrepreneurship, firm productivity, firm dynamics, the impact of financial crisis, and women's economic empowerment. Her role includes advisor to the chief economist of World Bank, co-manager of the Jobs Group, and the founding member of the Microeconomics of Growth Network. Mary received her Master's Science in Development Economics from Oxford University and her PhD in Economics from MIT. Live from Washington and Madrid, Beatriz and Mary. Beatriz, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Aurelia. Thanks for the invite. I'm delighted to be here. There's an amazing agenda in front of us for the next couple of days. And it's interesting to see an event like this starting with a piece of art. Now, getting into the topic, I'm glad the way you structure the event, starting from a block around the macro level, starting from the top, because I think, in my view, that could be crucial for developing policies that account for the impact at scale. In my views, the public and private partnership will be crucial, and it's crucial to create long-term value, especially when it comes to a topic like this, to the implementation of technologies like AI, automation, or robotics. And COVID-19 has highlighted the need to accelerate on the digital economy goals. Governments have a dual role to play in this context. In one side, they need to protect the citizens by implementing frameworks, policies, regulation that protect the citizen around, privacy, ethics, security, putting the AI applications with humans at the centers. That's one side. But at the other side, they also need to encourage the global community of business and support the investments of the global community of business to really to invest in this kind of technology to gain in competitiveness and therefore to create longer term value. Now, the balancing between the two is not always easy. Actually, it comes tough when we take it one level above nations, because traditionally high income countries have been collaborating with lower income countries to support some offshore kind of activities. Now, with automation and AI coming to play, these traits might be very, very different. Having international and global institutions such as the World Bank with us is amazing, because they for sure have a point of view about these trends, the mechanisms, the impact that is ahead of us. And I'm delighted to have Mary with us today, and I'm just really looking forward to have this conversation with you, Mary. So thanks again for accepting our invite to be here with us today. Now, I have a first question, a set of questions for you. Maybe we can, take it one way or the other. But let me maybe start with, I'd like you to share with us, some of the conclusions, your conclusions from your analysis of automation as a disrupting factor in the global economy, what kind of sectors you see, as the most being impacted, etc. Is there any?
Great. Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I really appreciate it. So the good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. I will say, as a member of the World Bank staff, that these views are my own and based on my own research and not necessarily reflecting the official position of the World Bank, its board of executive directors, or its governments. But I will say that this is a topic that is incredibly important and timely. And as an institution, we are looking at the impacts around the world. So this is not just sort of a topic at the frontier and how to push the boundaries. It has huge impacts for all countries around the world, both upside real potential, as well as you've mentioned some risks and trade-offs that need to be balanced. And so that's, I think, part of what we see as our role, trying to help bring knowledge, evidence, data to understanding this and helping policymakers understand and how to help navigate in different kinds of contexts, how to take advantage of the upside as much as possible while safeguarding at the same time. And the COVID, I think, the reaction, the fact that you've got people now from so many different countries participating in this is one example of how technology can enable both more knowledge sharing and bringing together, but different kinds of activities that are possible on a scale that we hadn't really thought about even a year ago. But it's also true when you look around, it underscores that technology is uneven. And I think this is really important on multiple dimensions. But we can think of different kinds of jobs that we can do potentially virtually or home-based and potentially that much more safe. You can think of jobs where automation enables more people, even if they're at work physically, to be more spread out and do their work in an efficient and safe way. And then there's huge sets of jobs where you can't do that. So the way that automation can change different kinds of opportunities needs to be taken into account. And then there's also just access to technology and these concerns around a digital divide. So some countries, their populations really can access, in this case, maybe ICT, or they've got the technology and the engineers and the electricity and other things to be able to have more sophisticated technologies. In other cases, not so much. But technological change has been a driver for growth opportunities throughout history. So the real issue isn't whether or not technology is going to change, it is. And many would say the degree of change is accelerating. So it's really about how to boost the capabilities of as many people and economies and societies to be able to take advantage of it. And here, again, going back to this needing to take in sort of seriously how different technologies are affecting different kinds of sectors. So in my own work, I've done a lot of work on researching and manufacturing. And you can think sort of two extremes. You can think of things like automotives and cars. And you can think of the pictures, whether this is Detroit in the United States, it can be Mexico, it can be India. You can find the same pictures of all those robots, kind of like the one with the opening video, that are incredibly sophisticated and helping put together some parts of the automobile. And this is where it makes sense. They're heavy, they're high value added, precision really matters, and robots are great for all of those things. But then there are other parts, even in a car, where it's very hard to automate. And then you have on the other extreme things like garments, where it's very hard to have robots still manage the sort of dexterity of our hands with different kinds of cloths and different kinds of stitching. So the degree and pace of automation is very different across different subsectors. So the pace of change that different companies are facing, but also countries based on where in different kinds of sectors and value chains they're operating, how much sort of upskilling and what sort of time frame they're at. So understanding the pace of change varies. But I think the other piece is technology and technology policy is part of it. But there's a huge, what we call sort of analog complements agenda that also matters for you to be able to take advantage of that technology, right? So to be able to be on a Zoom call, you need access to ICT. You need access to electricity. To take advantage of just e-commerce and be able to buy things from your home, you have all of the logistics systems let alone this sort of skills. So I think the agenda is a multi-sectored one. And unfortunately, it does need some sort of specialization, but it also means there is opportunities at lots of different layers within this ladder to be able to take advantage of it.
Exciting. Sometimes we take things as a given, but it's not. And it's interesting how boundaries between sectors are blurring somehow through kind of these new technologies. Is there, back to the point of private and public kind of cooperation and partnership, etc. Are there any examples of cooperation around projects and innovation that you have come across in your work that you could share with us?
And there are lots of them. I mean, so certainly in a very broad sense, the public sector is trying to provide an enabling environment and often more incentives to help private sector innovation. But there are a lot of examples of very specific ways that this has been done. So one, you could think just even in transportation and ride sharing apps or satellite and mapping that can also be used to help inform government in everything from how to improve the efficiency of their public transportation systems and where this could really help make a difference, particularly for lower income people to be able to commute not just quicker, but cheaper and safer in terms of getting to work. You've got ones where they can tell much more quickly where roads need repairing, how to get emergency vehicles quickly to where they are needed. We have other sort of situations. One example that we've been using a lot is drones in Rwanda, partly because it's a smaller country delivering blood in emergency situations, particularly where the roads may not be as efficient as being able to get a really needed product quickly to a particular situation. We've got others where we've been working with using blockchain in certain agricultural value chains to be able to help those farmers that are meeting quality standards to be able to sort of tag, in this case, we've worked with mangoes, we've worked with avocados, all the way through the supply chain to be able to show that they are meeting and all the photosanitary standards, but keeping things cool all the way through, keeping out some of the costs that otherwise go to middlemen and being able to sell in markets at a higher price than they would otherwise be able to get. So being able to harness some of that technology to ensure that smallholder farmers are being able to get a higher price for their product, and to provide the incentive as well for them to be raising their productivity and the quality of the product that they're offering. So I think there's lots of them. There's others, in the health sector, using AI and different kinds of data to really try and understand where outbreaks may be happening, all the way to how to help sort of personalize some of the different kinds of medical treatments that are being used. So obviously on health, there's all kinds of privacy issues. So that matters too. The rules that the government provides around privacy, around competition are going to be critical too in ensuring the balance that you were talking about again at the beginning. But there's an incredible set of different innovative companies that are coming that can do business and drive new business models and new services, new products. That's great. But there are also these opportunities to help harness some of those for some of the broader challenges and public goods that governments are trying to do as well. So yes, there's absolutely enormous scope for these partnerships.
That's so exciting. I mean, I think the opportunities are endless. It's probably our creativity what is limiting actually the most. But now let me maybe touch on a different topic, because when we talk about automation and AI, the topic around workforce always, comes across. Can you maybe share with us some of the measures that you observe governments taking to enable workforce adaptation to these changes in the labor market?
Sure. So actually, the World Bank has sort of a flagship publication every year, and the 2 years ago, the topic was precisely on this: the future of work, and looking at how technology is changing and what this means for workers. And I have to say, the topic is a hot one. We have the one that's coming up this coming year is on data and how data can contribute to development. So anyway, just reinforcing the importance of this. But some of the key messages that come out, the importance of skills and enabling people to have the capabilities to take advantage of this. And a couple of, again, distinctions that are important to make. So one is that people think, oh, digital skills. And yes, you need digital skills, but it's important to distinguish those who are the producers and creators of some of these new technologies. So if you're the programmer on whatever AI application, yes, you need very strong digital skills. But for those who are using them, you don't necessarily need such high skills, right? If you think of your phone and the kinds of things you can do on your phone, and you can give your phone to any sort of 3-year-old, they'll be able to manage your phone to get to all kinds of things, right? A lot of things you don't need even necessarily to be particularly literate or have very many sort of digital, sort of other kinds of skills you can, with the pictures, with sound, be able to navigate and use. So I think that sort of the extreme is really important to keep in mind, that there's lots of applications that can absolutely raise the productivity of people without huge skill requirements. So it's not the case that everybody has to be trained up to be able to program AI applications. That this is something that really can have much broader benefits. At the same time, we also recognize that there are other kinds of skills that some of which are being displaced. And a lot of the work, including in academia, talks about this sort of hollowing out of the middle, where automation, including in software, so it's not just sort of industrial robots, are taking some of those middle skilled jobs out. So there does need to be awareness and ability to change and shift and retool. And it's also worth remembering that there are some skills that robots and software can't replace. And so there's been a lot of emphasis on some of the socio-emotional skills, the care skills, the empathy skills. And yes, there are some robots that they're trying to sort of help replace with some of those, but I think humans really do like the human touch. I think the last few months are reinforcing how much we in fact really value that. So these kind of skills are not necessarily the ones that have traditionally been taught in schools. So the sort of education systems and sort of an idea of a lifelong learning is something else that really needs to be taken seriously to sort of appreciate and understand and have the human skills valued and where they can complement different other kinds of technology. And I just want to sort of emphasize one other kind of skill I think that's really important, and that is managerial skills. So when you look again at this question of who is able to take advantage of technology, a huge chunk of that comes down to management within the firm and managing in a constructive way the disruption within the firm of taking on new ways of doing things. So it can be efficient, it can raise productivity, raise profits, raise wages, but having the wherewithal and understanding of what kind of technologies are out there, how they can improve the firm, how to manage the firm through that transition are critical. And that is actually one of the biggest predictors of how successful technology is at being diffused and taken up more broadly, is how well the management skills to take advantage of that, as well as take advantage of the potential kinds of benefits that this improvement can have within a firm. So having the feedback loops, having the kinds of systems in place in a firm to take advantage of it are really critical. And again, they vary. And so there's opportunities to strengthen and support those kind of management skills such that it is something that is shared more widely on the upside.
That's exciting, yeah, because we typically think about the negative side and just look at the skills that might be displaced, but we don't think about, kind of all the rest, and more on the positive side of the story. Can you maybe give us a view of organizations like the World Bank? How do you support governments in advancing their growth agenda and achieve kind of their results? And how is automation and AI kind of part of it?
So I think we come at it sort of 3 different ways. I mean, so in part, as an organization, again, we try and help provide evidence, we collect data, we do evaluations, we discuss with policymakers, and we're also a financial institution. We provide resources to help with investments to try and further this agenda. But in terms of sort of the substantive areas, so we've talked about the capabilities and helping workers. We also look at some of the social protection systems, particularly if there's disruption, and the kind of sort of safety nets to help workers that may be displaced. how to help them in terms of moving into new opportunities. I think more broadly, we work a lot on the sort of broader business environment kind of and competitiveness to help firms be able to enter and grow, to be innovative, and absolutely to hire. So there's a lot of on the business environment, on infrastructure, and a range of different pieces that are needed for the private sector to really be able to thrive. And I think a piece within that certainly is a sort of a connectivity agenda. So that is both on an ICT connectivity, so that you have access to lots of the sort of digital technologies, but it's also the transportation and the power and et cetera, other enabling infrastructure that's needed for all of this to work. But certainly, you know, the economies are increasingly connected, and to be part of these broader growth opportunities, that piece is increasingly important to make sure that people and businesses and economies really are connected to the larger markets and the larger opportunities. So our role is to try and come through, look at that, but you know, and balance what is the appropriate kinds of technology for where a country is in its stage of development. And so it's not to take technology for its own sake, or necessarily to take, you know, the latest shiny thing and say, oh, we have to have it. If you don't have what it takes to support it, you don't have either on the household worker side or on the firm side, or even on the government capabilities in the official side, really the skills and capabilities and supporting structures to use it, it's not the right thing. So it is also sort of, again, balancing and tempering. The technology can be contributing, automation can be part of that, AI can be part of that, but it has to be something that the country can actually use to be able to have the kinds of benefits that you want. And this is going to be always an ongoing process. And so it is working to help keep countries on that road and improving, but really sort of calibrating what's the right kind of solution given the context that country is in.
That's interesting. How would you compare the software automation versus the industrial automation? Do you have a point of view on that?
So I think this is actually really interesting. So I think, you know, looking back just even over, I guess maybe 50 years, right? So ICT sort of coming in the 70s, and a chunk of that would also have been some preliminary software. Some of what that helped do, along with sort of the containerization of transportation and falling transportation costs, helped in industrial production really get broken down. And a lot of this sort of global value chains and this offshoring and manufacturing happening elsewhere. Automation has, you know, industrial automation has sped that up. There tends to be a lot of, you know, very complex global value chains for developing countries. This has been a huge source of growth. An enormous contribution to reducing poverty is precisely because there's an ability to be focused and produce a piece. You don't have to produce the whole car, but you might be able to produce the seatbelts, or you might be able to produce, you know, the tires. And so it gives opportunities to be part of much bigger value chains and product lines that way. When you look at it now, the question is, with automation, is there going to be reshoring of some of this manufacturing? The question, and whether COVID is going to underscore that, there's some huge questions about it. I think the efficiency gains of dividing things up and having more labor-intensive pieces done in countries where labor costs are lower is a big driving force. I mean, one, again, an example, but Adidas speed factories, that there were two, you know, one in the United States and one in Germany, that were 3D printing shoes, right? And they looked cool, right? Though the machine, you could see the videos, everyone's like, oh my goodness. And then it's like, is this the end of this? So, you know, so it's certainly true that footwear as well as garments are largely been done in countries, again, with lower labor costs. Does this mean it's all going back to high income countries? So sort of two things. I mean, it's possible, right? So it's technologically possible. But just last year, right, Adidas announced that they were actually closing those two factories and moving them back to China and Vietnam, because it mattered to be closer to the rest of the supply chains and their distribution centers. So you need to look both at what's technologically possible and what is economically viable. And the cost structures in different places, again, vary. You know, you look at other kinds of sort of 3D printing where customization may matter. So one example is hearing aids, where if they can customize it to you, it's a much better product than if it's sort of a generic one. And you've seen a huge transformation in that sector from almost none to virtually, I don't know, over 90% of hearing aids are now 3D printed to fit exactly into your ear. And on the one hand, you think 3D printing, you know, everybody could have a 3D printer in their backyard and you'll just, you know, everything is going to be massively dispersed, the production. But that isn't in fact what's happened. You have very specialized machines that are printing these, and there's become sort of 3 global hubs. So one in Poland, one in Mexico, and one in Vietnam, serving different regions in the world. They're light, they're easy to distribute, and so it makes sense. The technology is super sophisticated to have it quite centralized and then distribute the product. So I think there's, again, you need to understand the economics of different sectors and different technologies to understand what some of these different patterns may be. But in terms of software, I think the question is, it's a different set of skills that may be being replaced. I think this raises concerns of people who had thought that their jobs might be potentially less vulnerable to some of these kind of changes. On the other hand, it is, again, one of these, the software can really improve the productivity of what people are doing. And it can expand the kinds of activities and the kinds of things that are being done. So it's going to be, as always, these trade-offs between what kind of substitution and what kind of growth opportunities there may be. But it does sort of underscore that any kinds of times there's change in technology, there are disruptions. There will be, unfortunately, both winners and losers. And it matters, back to the government policy, to pay attention to these distributional impacts and to think about what it takes to have acceptance of these kinds of changes, to really look at supporting those who are being disrupted and to give the kinds of support to enable them to adjust and to look for where the new growth opportunities, where the new kinds of occupations, the new kinds of changes are happening, because there are, anytime there is disruption and some are phased out, there are new kinds of things that come. We just need to make sure that the people are able to access a number of those opportunities.
All right. I know I think we have only 2 minutes left, but there's one question that is on top of me on my tongue, and I need to, because when we talk about automation, it's typically an AI, big transformation at scale, etc. And transformation doesn't happen without the right leadership skill. So, I mean, in your views, I mean, how does an effective leadership look like when it comes to transforming in a society?
Well, so I would say a lot of it is going to be on a mindset, and then the values that get transformed into what the rules and regulations are going to be. So we started this with this balance between the opportunities and the risks. So you want the kinds of rules that will encourage and enable innovation while protecting some of the deeper values that are at stake. So we know it's not just in economics, it has social impacts. There are questions about data privacy, about how human-centered some of these technologies would be, particularly when they're coming into all kinds of issues that have huge implications for people's lives, you know, how this may be applied in health, how this is being used in a range of different things. So I think this is a critical area, and where we're also learning what some of the right kinds of rules need to be. It's not just sort of disruption on businesses, but it is disrupting how we think about media, how we think about voice and participation, the kinds of transparency that's possible, but the rules and protection for that and for the privacy of people who are using these different kinds of technologies absolutely need to be in this equation. And again, there's variation across countries. You know, many of you are sitting in Europe, where it's taken very strong positions on some of this. There are other countries that are really at the beginning and don't yet have things on the books in terms of revising data privacy, thinking about some of the security implications, thinking about some of the competition implications, to really make sure that the technology is moving forward on an economy and a society that really is a wanted one. So I think that this broader framing of these whole issues, as you're doing with this conference, is really critical to make sure that the leadership and the country and its citizens are really able to, again, take advantage of these opportunities, but really mitigate some of the risks, including some new risks that this is introducing to.
Thank you,
So
Mary.
I wish you really well with this conference. It's a great topic.
Thank you.
Great two days.
I love your views. I think you said this is impacting every country. I mean, you make difference between, core skills or capabilities and adjacents, which are also kind of critical, the difference between producers and creators. The importance to balance was technologically possible versus economical viable. You talk about mindset in terms of leadership. I really, really appreciate you sharing with us today. I know you have a very tough agenda, so thank you. And Aurelia, the stage is yours.
Thank you.